I was doing the comics, and my publisher, Martin Goodman, told me how he wanted them done. A lot of action, a lot of fight scenes, not too much dialogue. Our readers don't like to read dialogue. And don't use any big words. They're not good at vocabulary. Just concentrate on the fight scenes. That's what they like. Well, I can write a fight scene, I think, as well as anybody, but that's not what I wanted to spend my life doing. I said, how about characterization? How about caring for the characters and building them? Give me fight scenes. So I went home and I said to Joni, you know, honey, I think I'd like to quit. I can see this job as a dead end. It's going to lead to nothing. I might as well leave now and try to find something else to do. And then the thing you're leading up to, she gave me the world's greatest advice. She said, why don't you do one book the way you want to do it? The worst that'll happen, he'll fire you, but you want to quit anyway. At least you'll have gotten it out of your system.
Stan Lee, he was not the owner of Marvel. He was not the one who invented the comic book genre, but yet he became the face of it. And not only the face of it, he became the face of an entire culture. The stories and characters that he helped to create in Marvel Comics helped to resonate with the audience, the public at large. These characters showed the vulnerabilities that we ourselves had, and of course made us want to read them and be part of them.
Stan Lee, writer, editor, publisher, he was the ambassador of the Marvel comic world, and we are all that much better for it. See, what people, I think a lot of people may not realize with the Marvel Comics is one of the reasons why they took off and hit that they did is they tapped into a new audience that comic books weren't getting at the time. Now, the Marvel Comics, however, were tacking older. They were tacking from about 12, almost say to 18. And they were very contentious. The Fantastic Four is a family, and they're always bickering, which was something you could definitely, put your hands on. And then you go further, we have the Marvel Comics, let's say Iron Man, which are tapping into the Korean War or the Vietnam War once we get to Rhodey. And so these made them very, very attractive for readers who were older. By older, I mean 12 years old isn't significantly older, but 12, to 18, and then a lot of these guys still remember them, and they kept reading during college as Spider-Man was kind of growing up with you up to a certain extent.
It was his telling you you're part of a gang, telling you that you're part of the Marvel Marching Society, the Mary Marching Society, that he sent you the what do you call it, the no gift, that you answer some question, and he sent you this no prize. You open the letter and there's nothing in it. That he plays tricks on you, that he was the first interactive media system there ever was. Because you wrote a letter, you got one back. You talked about somebody, he talked about the people drawing the comics while they were drawing the comics. Oh, Jack really had a good time drawing this, and I decided not to talk but one for this whole page. Cling, clang, bang, bang. No conversation. His narrative was direct to the reader and not to the idea of what's going on to the comics.
Now, Marvel gets prominent enough in the future, sometime in the 70s, where with Fireside Publications, they're able to make trade paperbacks. And these trade paperbacks primarily are reprints of materials that had been published earlier.
As a kid, my mother and father read, my brother and I, Stan Lee's Origin of Marvel Comics and The Son of Origin. We loved them as much as the DC characters, maybe even more. But then as we turned to teens, me and my brother decided we should go back and read that old volume, see how it held up. And we were surprised. We didn't, at that, as a kid, you don't know anything. And you realize this is one of the most creative periods in comic books. And it was just a joy, the seriousness and also the fun and the humor that's all in those books.
The origin stories were also with an origin of the origin story. There was this great typed page, and it felt like it was fresh off the presses from Stan Lee's typewriter. It detailed the origin of that particular character, as much as Stan Lee himself could actually speak to it, which made for a very full reading, of those original trade paperbacks with the origin stories, Origin and Son of Origin. Marvel Method is something that is it's born out of necessity. As Stan Lee needs to be able to get this stuff done in a certain amount of time, and writing full scripts is going to be really hard for him with all the other middle management responsibilities he would have. But in the same breath, hey, look at the results that we got from what was really something that was born out of necessity. So it was important for him not just to write and come up with these ideas, but he was also looking to push these books. When you look and you see something like Iron Man, and Iron Man first comes out and he's in a gray uniform. A lot of guys think that was just for one issue. No, he was gray for a little bit, and then he changes to the golden armor and so on and so forth. Well, the changes those are the editorial decisions coming from Stan Lee. He's looking at the numbers and saying, well, look, what can we do to improve these numbers on this? Well, let's give him a new suit. Let's try a different color. Let's do this. And then once it clicks, that's when we see, okay, the changes stop. That's when the numbers are where they're supposed to be. So when we get to that classic Iron Man armor, that's where it is, okay, fine, we've got it now. This is exactly where it should be. And there'll be some tweaks here and there, but it lasts as long as it did because the numbers were exactly where they needed to be.
There is something called the Marvel method of writing comics, which is really the Stan Lee method. What happened was they had always been written scripted, the way a motion picture has a screenplay. And I used to write them that way. I'd write the script, give it to the artist, and he would draw it. But by the time we were doing Spider-Man and the Hulk and the Fantastic Four and Iron Man and Daredevil and Thor, I didn't even mention the X-Men and the X-Men. I couldn't write them fast enough. And these artists were so brilliant, and they were so good at story themselves, that I would say to the artist, look, this is the plot I want. And I would either tell them in a few words what the story was, or I would write an outline on a page or 2 pages or a few paragraphs. And I'd say, you go ahead and draw it any way you want. It doesn't matter. I'll put the words in and tie it all together. And they did that. And it worked out beautifully.
Now, I mean, again, Stan Lee was working with some of these, and again, only time would show how great they were. But Stan Lee was working with Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby. There's some heavyweights at the end of the day, so I couldn't imagine these guys not being able to turn it out. But it was also something that where they had Stan Lee, where, it was a mutual thing, and this whole convergence of ideas was supposed to happen. Now, because of this, Stan Lee was the prime guy to come and do this lecture circuit that a lot of people, I don't know if are familiar with today, but he was going to colleges like Muhammad Ali, and Stan, while not Muhammad Ali, still, fit into that mold of bringing something to the masses and being the, not the gatekeeper, but definitely the doorman who opened up the door and said, hey, look, come on, welcome in, explaining Marvel Comics as these archetypes. And they're told through these particular characters. And Stan was very, very personable. It just really came across that he really enjoyed what he was writing and what he was doing, and he becomes the face. The face, the heart, the blood of Marvel Comics for so many people. And this also is very needed because later on, where Marvel's about to change hands and about to be sold, but part of the agreement on the deal was that if they were going to buy Marvel, Stan had to stay in place, and they wanted his name, Stan Lee Presents, because Stan had become so synonymous with Marvel Comics and the Merry Marvel Marching Society and the lecture circuits, but really treating this to a manner, with the gravitas that hadn't been done before with comics. It's the same thing that we see in the films, even through those cameos. It's that link.
Our friend here was involved, according to Box Office Mojo, in $16 billion. Movies that he was involved with grossed over $16 billion. I don't think anyone else can claim the same thing. No one else can claim to be the cameo in as many cameos as he has. He was the face of the MCU. Basically, he was the face of every Marvel comic. If there was a Marvel comic that was turned into a movie or a TV show or even animated, he was there. And that was tremendous, because when you saw his face there, that was a seal of approval that this was a Marvel comic. For all intents and purposes, he was a good housekeeping seal of comic.
Stan Lee was a character in and of himself. So him playing all these cameos in all the Marvel movies just was, we'll know what we miss once we see him again in the next Marvel movie, or we go back to look at the old films. And hopefully Hollywood will also recognize him when they do the memorials at the end of the Oscars, where they put everyone face up, and maybe they'll put up Stan's face and be someone who we felt was talking to us as a writer and also an editor. And he'll just be missed.
That's how important he was to comics. So he was an incredible, important figure in the culture that we currently live in.
Stan Lee was a guy who didn't even go by his real name because he didn't think the field that he was working in was a worthwhile field, and he wanted to save his name for something that would be these great landmarks of literature. Lo and behold, he gives us these great landmarks of literature. So, that part of you that you may be a little shy about or even embarrassed about, it's okay. It's cool. Just do your best with it, and everybody's going to come right along with it. Excelsior.
Let's lay it right on the line. Bigotry and racism are among the deadliest social ills plaguing the world today. But unlike a team of costume supervillains, they can't be halted with a punch in the snoot or a zap from a ray gun. The only way to destroy them is to expose them, to reveal them for the insidious evils they really are. The bigot is an unreasoning hater, one who hates blindly, fanatically, indiscriminately. If his hang-up is black men, he hates all black men. If a redhead once offended him, he hates all redheads. If some foreigner beats him for a job, he's down on all foreigners. He hates people he's never seen, people he's never known, with equal intensity, with equal venom. Now, we're not trying to say it's unreasonable for one human being to bug another. But, although anyone has the right to dislike another individual, it's totally irrational, patently insane to condemn an entire race, to despise an entire nation, to vilify an entire religion. Sooner or later, we must learn to judge each other on our own merits. Sooner or later, if a man is ever to be worthy of his destiny, we must fill our hearts with tolerance. For then, and only then, will we be truly worthy of the concept that man was created in the image of God, a God who calls us all his children. Pax et Hustia. Stan.
My personal Stan Lee story. I was 11. It was Christmas, and I was one of 5 children, and I was the one in the middle. My mother really liked that I liked comics because she used to read them herself and everything, and I was drawing and getting myself into it and everything. Christmas passed, and it was maybe a week later, before New Year's or something, and my Uncle James comes to the house, and I said, Uncle James, she says, Uncle James, tell your Uncle James to meet me in the car. We got down, she had a car, he got in it, she said, you're gonna drive, I don't feel like driving. He was driving, she got it, Paris, go get in the car, I got in the car. Bring some of your stuff. I said, okay. I said, you gonna show some people? Yeah, I'm gonna show some people. We drove, and I'm going, where are we going? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Like any 11-year-old kid. We finally pull over and we're crossing the New York Bridge, and I see the Empire State Building and way in the distance, all this other stuff. And she says, you be okay? I'm gonna send you in there and you go talk to them yourself, right? She finally pulls up and it's on Madison Avenue. She points to the front door and she says, you go up there, I think it was the 11th floor, go up to the 11th floor and you tell them I sent you. I get up there and I said, my mommy sent me. They said, your mom is who? Doris Cullins. And she says, well, I'm Paris Cullins. And the woman, her name was Erica, I think. She said, oh, he's expecting you. He'll come get you. The door opened, it was Stan Lee. Your mother set up an appointment for me to see you. True believer. Come on with me and I'll show you around. He showed me around. He took a look at my work and told me, hey, you're young. The work is good, but you need a little time. Come see me. In 6 years. You're really pretty good. You should become what it is you want. Just give yourself the time and continue to do it. That was my first meeting with Stan Lee. Wow. And I had saw him 6 times before and after that. So the addendum is, my mother was taking courses in college in literature, and Stan Lee came to do a lecture, and she stepped up and asked him to take a look at my son's work, which she was a very gorgeous woman, so most men did say no to her, and neither did Stan.
Hi everybody, this is Marge with Spin Racket. I'm here with Veronica here at the WinterCon, and we're talking about how the death of Stan Lee affected you. Veronica, talk to me.
Well, Stan Lee has created something that's very life-changing, and without Stan Lee, we wouldn't have all these conventions, all these events, and life would be very different without him.
Sanjay Singh of Clean Shot Pro or Clean Shot Productions. It hurt. He was a lineman for, I mean, granted it was stateside, but still, he was a military man. I fully appreciate Stan Lee for what he did, what he does.
My name's Tommy. Impacted a lot. Very sad to hear. I was in shock for a couple of days. I think we all were. Incredible man that transcended time. The characters that he created were just great for the time. Like, he fought against racism and all kinds of sexism. Like, when people did not want to hear that. Spider-Man, for one, everyone told him no. No one's going to like a guy named Spider-Man, and he's probably the most recognizable character ever. Black Panther, you know, he created Black Panther in the 60s where people did not want a full-time black character, especially one from an African country, being rich, smart, and better than anybody. So, great man, great legacy.
Hi, my name is Jarrell, aka Belgrave Cosplay on Instagram. Oh man, it was devastating. Like, I was at work and I found out I was on my phone, and I just had to pause and just take it in for a minute. And like, you know, growing up, coming home after school, watching that 90s Spider-Man cartoon with my dad, like, you know, not a lot of kids have that. Not a lot of kids that look like me especially have that. And to bond over that, it's just like, he automatically was associated with being a superhero, my dad, and then that, of course, in turn made Stan Lee even bigger in my eyes, because he just showed how diverse any community can be. Even superheroes can be nerdy, even superheroes can fumble, even superheroes can drop the ball, but it's just about getting back up and make sure you try again and try your hardest and just get better, you know, learn from your mistakes. So all of that kind of just spawned just from like a character that Stan Lee created, and so many other characters that he created, like obviously Black Panther, you know, I'm wearing M'Baku, and obviously in the time where it was just so controversial to have an African American character in the forefront of anything really, and he stuck with it even when it was turmoil, because he was named Black Panther and he had to change Black Panther's name temporarily to Black Jaguar. Like, he still stuck with it. He didn't give up. He just changed the route and made sure he went around any roadblocks. And that, to me, just shows that we all can do that. So that's an amazing thing, and it's really, really sad to see him go.
Wild Dog.
Hey, Wild Dog. Hey. So
you know, losing Stan Lee was like losing a big uncle. And what makes it even sadder for me is that I had an opportunity to meet him at Big Apple Con, but he was too ill. So just the fact that I lost that opportunity to see him really, really broke my heart. But he's in a better place.
Alex.
And Heather.
I mean, he was one of the greats, one of the grandfathers of comics. I've been reading his stuff since I was old enough to read. So he's gonna be missed. He really is.
He's one of the people that when it was a celebrity that dies, like, you know, you're usually like, all right, it's a celebrity. I cried.
Oh wow.
I really like had a full on, like, I was on the couch just crying because, you know, growing up, especially with comic books, you're a nerd. You know, you get labeled as a nerd. And when you're a woman being a nerd, it's twice as hard. You get, like, shunned by every group known to man. And it's not until more recently, especially with Stan Lee, like, he took over everything. Like, when, I mean, he was already in charge, but just, you know, you knew Stan Lee. Everyone knew Stan Lee. It doesn't matter whether you're DC, Marvel, Indie, any of them. Everyone knew Stan Lee.
New York's Sixth Ranger. Yeah, the news hit me really hard when I first heard it. It's kind of one of those things where you expect it, right? It was 95, his health was failing, missing cons, wife just passed away last year. But no matter how much you expected, it still hits you really hard when it finally happens. So, yeah, I was really torn up about it.
Geisha V. Hi, everybody.
Hey, Geisha.
Ooh, it felt like losing, like, a really cool uncle. I've grown up with all kinds of comics thanks to my father and his co-workers since I was like a wee little kid. And I've even had the pleasure of meeting Stan on more than one occasion. And every time he was very encouraging to me. He was a very cheeky individual, which was great because I needed to see that, someone reacting so bubbly and encouraging towards my cosplay, because I'm obviously a plus-size cosplayer of color, and you know, it's not always easy for us. So to meet someone of such a great stature be so encouraging of what I do as a creative person was breathtaking and like changed my life. So, and I've met other people who have worked with him, and it's like everyone I speak to who has encountered him and worked with him, it's always great, positive, wonderful things. He really was about everything he said in the videos about inclusivity and all that stuff. So to find out that he had passed broke my heart. And I was thinking about all the people who I know who work closely with him and how they must also feel. And it was just like, it really was like losing a member of your family. And it's hard for me to watch movies now when I see him because I feel both joy and sadness. But I feel that I really want to work towards honoring every character that he's done, that I cosplay, and it just kind of puts more of a fire under my ass, so to speak, to continue to fight for things that we had in common, and just to continue to try to be the best person first and best cosplayer that I can be, because if someone as awesome as Stan Lee supports me, then nobody else can stop that.
My first Marvel property, from as far back as I can remember, would have to be this old VHS I used to watch all the time as a kid, maybe about 3 or 4 years old. It was Pride of the X-Men. That was a failed X-Men pilot that they aired a little bit before the 90s X-Men that everyone's familiar with. And in the beginning of that pilot, Stan Lee actually introduces it. So not only was that my first Marvel product, that's one of my earliest memories of anything comic book related. One of my first memories of media. And it starts off with Stan Lee's narration. So
that is so cool.
Right? His voice is like one of the first things I can remember going as far back as I can.
You know, and he got me into, you know, I started reading, one of the first comics I read other than Batman was Spider-Man. You know, and it really impacted everything. It's still pretty hard to talk about, actually.
There's so many of them that are good and some that are great. But if anything, I guess I'd have to go with the Hulk. And the reason I'd go with the Hulk is because you have a tortured man, a nobody, somebody that people picked on, who became one of the most powerful machines in the world.
The first comic I read too was actually Spider-Man as well.
Wow.
Spider-Man was one of my all-time favorite heroes for a long time.
I think one of the most iconic characters that Stan Lee has done is probably going to be Spider-Man.
I had originally been looking at the Captain America comic books just because I thought he looked cool, and obviously I like stars. So, after I had just saw the comic book by cover and thought it looked fine, I read them. I watched every single Captain America movie ever.
Good movies?
And I think I've watched every single Marvel movie ever at this point.
Spider-Man is right up there next to Batman. It's always going to be the debate which one is going to go down in history as the greatest. It's either Batman or Spider-Man.
Yeah. Definitely Daredevil. Definitely Daredevil.
First is Spider-Man.
Yeah. Yes, he's a gateway drug for everybody.
he is, because like he's one of those guys who you can just relate to, because like Batman's a smart guy, but he's all gadgets. Superman can't be touched, so he's boring. Spider-Man has problems that we all have. You know, he's nerdy. He's, you know, bad with the ladies in the beginning before he grew into his powers, and his boss hates him. Like, who can't relate to a boss constantly crapping on him? And you know, he's just such a great guy. You know.
My first would be Spider-Man.
Man, everybody's saying Spider-Man.
As an engineer, science and physics compared, the thought of just him swinging through Midtown would make my day a whole lot happier if I see that through my office window. But yeah, Spider-Man's one of my favorites.
Has to be a tie between Tony Stark and Captain America.
Can't go wrong there.
Two halves of the battle.
It's beyond good stories. It's like having a mental problem, but it wasn't a mental problem. It's mental, physical, and the fact that I don't want to be weak. I don't want to be a monster. To have to deal with that on a daily basis and then be talking to somebody and wake up days or weeks later in the desert or somewhere else and wonder, how the hell did I get here? And now you're walking barefoot with no money, no ID, and you're trying to survive until the next time he takes over and you're somewhere else. And every time that you become the other character, people trying to kill you. You haven't done anything, you just want to be left alone. There's so many people in this world who want to be left alone. And somehow they seem to be tormented by other people.
I remember getting older, and when the Marvel movie first started coming out, realizing like I don't have to be, weird about being a nerd anymore. Like, it's becoming cool to be a nerd, and everyone's starting to come up to me and ask me, hey, do you know about this? Do you know about this? Where do I get started on that? And it was like a dream come true. And he was one of the people that was the forefather of that.
Yeah, and not to interrupt, but when I first started getting really into comics again, my local comic shop, Best Comics, I just walked in and they treated me like I was a regular person. So as a nerd, I didn't get that. So it's one of those, it's like, it was just phenomenal. And then I started working there, and then it got me into everything.
When I was over at NYCC, my aunt she gave me the money to give her a mystery box, and she got one of Stan Lee's replica Excelsior rings. And because it didn't fit her, she gave it to me. And then after his death, I started wearing it a lot more.
Oh wow, that's so cool.
And what's special about Stan, I liked his writing. There's no getting around it. There's no not liking. If you like Spider-Man, then you like Stan Lee. If you like Daredevil, you like Stan Lee. If you like the Fantastic Four, you like Stan Lee. There's no getting around it. He had every influence upon those comics, especially Thor 2. It's an influence of its cohabitation, and maybe it's all because of Stan. But one way or the other, we all owe Stan. Anybody who's involved in fantasy and involved in comic books in this era, it's all because of Stan.